Hi everyone, and welcome to week 12 of our Government 2306 Texas State and Local Government course. This week, our topic will be on public finance. Our objectives are to explain the purpose of the state budget and to describe what is typically included in it, to describe the general pattern of state spending in Texas, and to look at where state revenue comes from and where it goes, to describe how the money in the budget is organized into specific funds, to outline the constitutional provisions that affect how the state budget is made, to identify the major steps and players involved in making the state budget, and to analyze the impact of major budget crises in Texas. So let's start with the budget, which is a specific plan for how and from what sources state revenues will be collected, as well as how and where state resources will be spent. In other words, this is the balance sheet of the state operations. The 5 broad budgetary categories in Texas are the General Revenue Fund budget, which is the state's primary operating fund, like its piggy bank. The General Revenue, which is dedicated funds budget, which has specific funds that are set aside to specific purposes. The Federal Funds budget, which is accounting for all grants, payments, and other money that is received from the federal government. The Other Funds budget, which includes things such as the Texas Highway Fund. And the All Funds budget, which is basically all the previous budgets added together. In 2016-2017, the All Funds budget was estimated to be nearly $210 billion. Next, let's talk about and take a look at the spending and revenue in Texas. Texas is by its very nature rather stingy with its spending. In fact, on a variety of measures, Texas spends less than other states do. In Texas, the taxes tend to be relatively low. In 2012, Texans paid $44.97 in state taxes for every $1,000 of personal income, which ranks at 46 among the 50 states. And while Texans pay a variety of taxes on a variety of things, the largest source of tax revenue is the state sales tax. Texas does not have a state income tax. Many people argue that this makes Texas a regressive tax state, meaning that those with the lowest incomes pay as a percentage of their income more than those with higher incomes do. So many have argued that we need to move to a progressive tax system like an income tax, which would tax Texans based on income with a sliding percentage scale that goes up as income levels go up. While you would think that taxes are the largest source of revenue for Texas, you would be wrong. The largest source of revenue in Texas is funds coming from the federal government. There are over 400 funds in the state treasury whose monies go to a variety of functions, and the most important of these are the General Revenue Fund, which is the primary operating fund in Texas, the Permanent School Fund, which funds public schools, the Available School Fund, which also funds public education, the State Highway Fund for building and maintaining roads, the Economic Stabilization Fund, also called the Rainy Day Fund, which provides funds for the state during times of stress. This is like the state's emergency savings account. The Permanent University Trust Fund that funds the University of Texas and Texas A&M University systems, the Higher Education Fund, which supports other higher education institutions in Texas, and the National Research University Fund that supports research universities. The Texas Constitution and other laws place limits on the budget. Just a few of these are: we have Biennium Budgeting, meaning that our legislators are required to plan for revenue and spending that it is at least 2 years in advance, which can make responding to a financial crisis rather difficult. Dedicated funds. We set aside specific money for specific purposes and we put restrictions on how that money can be spent. The pay-as-you-go limit, which requires that spending growth cannot exceed growth in the state's economy. Again, rather hard to predict when you're budgeting at least 2 years into the future. A specific welfare spending limit. Limitations on debt service, meaning interest on any bonds or loans outstanding, that exceeds 5% of the General Revenue Fund. And lastly, budget execution authority, which is primarily in the hands of the legislature and not the state's bureaucracy. In theory, Texas has a dual budgeting system, meaning that the responsibility for preparing the initial budget is shared by the governor and the legislature. But in reality, the budget is primarily the responsibility of the legislature through the Legislative Budget Board. Lastly, we will take a look at what happens when budget planning goes wrong and doesn't take into consideration such things as the economic recession that we had in 2008. After the Great Recession of 2008, a great deal of turmoil was caused in the Texas budget. While this did not hit Texas nearly as hard as it hit other states like California, significant cuts were needed in the 2011 budget in order to cover a $4.3 billion shortfall in general tax revenue. This hit public education and social services quite hard, and we are just now catching up on these areas. Okay, that just about covers what we will be discussing in this week's lectures. Now let's talk about what you will be working on in terms of assignments this week. You do not have a discussion question or a writing assignment this week. However, you do have quiz number 3, which covers chapters 7 to 10 in your textbook. This will be due by Friday, April 19th. Most importantly, your policy proposal papers will be due starting on Monday, April 22nd. I will give a detailed walkthrough video on this paper later this week, so until then, take a look at your homework instructions, which can be found in the syllabus and course information tab of your main menu. You will prepare a one-page paper which has the following specific parts. First, the topic, which explains what your project will be about. This should be in the form of a research question. For instance, how can the problem of migrant immigration best be addressed by cities in Texas? Second, you will develop a 1 to 2 paragraph thesis statement which outlines the background of your problem and states a position as to how you believe it should be addressed. You're specifically asked to provide that background, your initial hypotheses, what you believe to be the solution, and a stated objective as to the purpose of your research project and its proposed outcomes. Third will be the project design section, which should specifically describe how you will conduct and organize your research, including what methods you will use to collect any data or investigate the problem, and a brief description of the evaluation and recommendations, which will be included in the project. Fourth is the product section, which will be a brief discussion of the final product and its components. For instance, what type of product will you produce? A paper, a video, a PowerPoint? If you intend to do an alternate type of project, like a video or a PowerPoint, please be specific and email me so that I can give you further instructions and we can set some parameters and expectations as to how and what your final product would look like and include. Whatever type of project that you do, which I would assume for most of you would be a traditional research-based paper or a literature review, you must include 10 to 15 research sources, which you can find through the library databases. The majority of these should be peer-reviewed journal resources and not simply web pages that are found through Google searches. Okay, that covers what we need to do this week. Please let me know if you have any questions, and you have a great week. I will see you in class and online.